Hey everybody, it's your girl Robin, and today I'm going to show you guys how to do a standard walk cycle. Now, walk cycles are notoriously difficult and can get somewhat confusing, so hopefully this video is going to help you guys out with that. A walk cycle is kind of like a character's fingerprint. It's totally unique to them. No two walk cycles are the same. So you're going to take what I show you in this video with a standard walk cycle, and you're going to apply that to your character and then use that base to build off of to show who your character truly is. Now, walking is basically just falling forward gently but letting your foot catch you in time, propelling you forward. There are 4 key poses in a walk cycle, which are contact, down, pass, and up. And then it cycles back to contact, which is why it's called a walk cycle, because it cycles through those poses. There are 2 key poses where both feet are on the ground at the same time. That's the contact and the down pose. And then the foot lifts, and after that it moves to the pass position, then up, and then back to contact, which are where the character is kind of falling forward and catching herself with the other foot. A standard walk cycle is generally over 24 frames, which is 2 steps per second, with the last contact pose being on the 25th frame. That's a pretty quick walk. So the first contact pose is on frame 1, then the down pose is on frame 4, where the legs bend and the body goes down slightly and the weight is shifted to the other leg. The pass position, where the leg that was behind passes the other leg that the character's weight is on frame 7. Then frame 10 is the up pose, where the character's body moves up on her toe a little and the other foot is kind of preparing to land. And then back to the contact position on frame 13. Then the next down pose is on frame 16, then pass position at frame 19, then up again on frame 22, then back to the contact position that we started on frame 25. Do you notice how there's this curvature or arc in the ups and downs? It's easier to see when you look at the height of the head and the hips. The sort of medium point is the contact position in terms of height. Then it goes down, then up to the pass position, which is slightly higher than the contact, then into the up pose, which is slightly higher than that, then back to the contact median point. Speaking of arcs, there are also arcs in the way the hands swing and the feet going up and down. Arcs are super important when animating. Now, like I said, this is just for a standard walk cycle, and you would change up the pace and the timing depending on the sort of vibe you're going for with your character and what they're feeling, what their purpose is. Are they in a rush? Are they depressed? Are they happy? All of this affects your walk cycle. You also need to be cognizant of what sort of animation you're working on, the style of it. A cartoony walk cycle is very different to a realistic walk cycle. Cartoon characters are often done on 8s, which is 3 steps per second, because it's a lot more snappy and upbeat. But a realistic walk cycle is usually a bit more leisurely. Now, there are 2 ways that animators do walk cycles: the feet sliding way and the not feet sliding way. Those are not the official terms. The feet sliding way, or TFSW as I have just right now named it, is when you've got the character actually walking in place with their feet sliding on the ground, and then you move the background behind them, or you just move the character as a whole along the ground. The non-feet sliding way, or NFSW, not to be confused with NSFW, is when you actually have the character walking, propelling themselves forward along the ground. So you're not moving the background behind them, you're not just moving their whole layer, they are actually using their feet the way real people walk to move forward. The thing with the first technique, TFSW, is that often you can see that the feet seem to be sliding on the ground. It can be difficult to match the movement of the background to the pace of the character's walk, or animating the position of that main controller to the pace of the feet. It can also be harder to get a nice, natural-looking movement with the body. The second way of actually moving the character forward with each step will get you a more accurate representation of the walk and the movement of the body, and avoid that effect of the feet sliding on the ground. Obviously, you have different needs for different projects and different programs, but if you are going to do it that way, moving the background behind them or moving the entire layer as a whole, then just be aware of that and try to make sure that it doesn't look like your feet are sliding on the ground. What you can do to try and help this is to have a little marker on the ground layer where the foot is placed, so a stone or a piece of grass or something. and then you keep that marker in line with the foot as long as the foot is on the ground. That way it can help you to keep the pace of the background moving at the same pace as the character. Now obviously your character's build will also affect the way that they walk. A super muscular person walks differently to someone who's really not muscular at all, or a really big person walks very differently to someone who's quite small. You also need to consider the differences in men and women's builds. Our hips rotate differently. Women often have a greater range of motion in their hips, and we usually walk with our feet placed in front of the center of our body rather than in front of the corresponding hip. And we also swing our hips a bit more. If you watch a model on the runway, you'll see how she's careful to place her feet in front of her, not to each side of her as she walks, and see how much her hips rotate. Now, obviously, models exaggerate it a lot more, and most women don't walk like that in their day-to-day life, but you also do exaggerate things a lot more in animation. Because of that hip rotation that women have and that swing in their hips as they walk, we actually often have a lot less of our heads bobbing up and down in our walk cycles, because that hip swing is actually acting as sort of a shock absorber and taking in some of that up and down movement. Men generally have stiffer hips, and they also have equipment in the way, so they will walk with their feet directly in front of the corresponding hip, not like a woman who's actually crossing her feet over into the center of her body as she walks. They'll bob up and down a lot more because of their stiffer hips. It's not absorbing that up and down movement as much as with a woman. Obviously, these are generalizations. Everyone is different, everyone has a different build, and every character is different. So again, every walk cycle is different and unique to your character. So when you're doing a walk cycle, concentrate on the feet and the body up and down movement before going on to the finer details. You'll start with the contact positions, which is where the legs are at their most extended, and both feet are on the ground. The arms are out slightly to either side of the body. The contact position is so important to get right. This is where the whole walk starts. Everything else stems off this position. You don't want to get to the end of your walk cycle and play it back and realize it looks weird because your contact position wasn't right. After that, you can do the next contact position, which will then be similar to your first contact, but with the opposite legs and arms extended. So if your right leg was in front in your first contact, obviously it will now be your left leg, and vice versa for the arms. Eventually it's going to cycle right back to ending in the same pose as it started. Make sure that the body is leaning in the same way as the first contact, or it'll look lopsided or like your character is limping when you play it back. Then you'll put in the pass position, because it's in the middle, and doing the two contacts and the pass position first gives you a nice structure to then fill in your down and up positions in between. The arms are on their way to going to the opposite extreme, so right now in the pass position, they're right by the body and are going to pass each other. Then you'll do the down pose. In the down pose, the legs are bent, and this position is what gives the walk its weight and impact. The foot that was bent upwards in the contact has now settled firmly on the floor, and the back foot is a bit more up on the toe, in preparation to be lifted off the ground. The weight is transferring to this foot that's now flat on the ground. Make sure to always be aware of your character's balance and where their weight is sitting. If they're leaning too far forwards or backwards, they'll either fall over or their walk will have a weird vibe that you weren't actually meaning to go for. Again, this is where weight and build are also important to be aware of, because if your character has a big stomach or something heavy on the front of their body, they will be leaning backwards to counter the weight that they're carrying in front. But generally, in a standard walk cycle, they will be leaning forward a little bit. So after the down pose, we can go and do the up pose, because we already did the pass position before. The up pose is where the body is at its highest, as your character has their heel lifted a bit. They'll be leaning quite far forward and their foot is a bit off the ground, ready to land on the floor for the next contact pose. Now let's look at the arms. The arms are obviously important too. They swing counter to the foot on the same side of the body. So when your left leg is forward, your left arm is back. Your arms are at their widest point on the down position. This is because that's when the character has hit the ground and their body is going down and reacting to that impact, which means their arms swing out too. I know it would be great if they were at their widest nicely and neatly in the middle, which is the pass pose, but it just isn't, so I'm sorry. Once you start to go into adding more detail to your walk, you'll also add follow through to your hands to give your walk a bit more realism and fluidity. As the arm moves forward, the hand drags behind, and as the arm changes direction and goes back, the hand will do the same a few frames later. You'll also go further and add hip and shoulder rotation, and again, that's where the counter movement comes in, and your shoulders will move counter to your hips. Obviously, if you're working in 2D, a walk cycle from the front will be approached slightly differently to a walk cycle from the side. But the same concept is there, it's the same key poses, you just need to approach them from a different angle. That's where working in 3D is nice because you just change the camera angle. Bonus tip, if you're working with a rig, you want to use FK, that's forward kinematics on your arms, and not IK, which is inverse kinematics, because you want to get those nice arcs in the swing of your arms. So you need your arm to rotate from the shoulder and not be guided by the hand, which would happen with IK. Now, for your walk cycle to cycle seamlessly, especially if you're looping it, you need your first and last contact positions to be exactly the same, or there's going to be a jump in your loop as it cycles through. If your character is sad, they'll be walking more slowly and they'll be slumped forward a little bit, and the down position will go down a little lower so that you can feel that heaviness in your character. You can also have the arms lag behind by a couple of frames just to show that there's that drag on what they're feeling. If your character's happy, they'll be walking a lot quicker, there'll be more bounce to their step, and their head and shoulders will be back and straight. Think about all the ways that your character's emotions and purpose, or lack of purpose, are going to come through in their body language and in their walk cycle. If your character's old, they might have a limp, or one side of their body might drag more than the other. And if they're really young, like toddler young, they might have some problems with balance. There's so many things to consider with your character in emotions and personality and physiology that you need to bring through in their walk cycle so that we can truly understand who your character is. So that's it for walk cycles. I hope that this video was helpful for you, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like me to cover in another video, and also if you just have any tips for other animators on doing walk cycles that you think would be helpful. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any others. Thanks for watching. Love ya. Bye.